The mating bond was supposed to be sacred, the most powerful force in all the northern packs, not chosen, not earned. Fated. When it snapped into place 3 years ago, binding Madeline Arlen's soul to Odin Wilhelmsson, Alpha of Nordvale, she believed it was a gift. She believed it the way young women believe in things they cannot see. Fiercely, absolutely, with a particular stubbornness of someone who has survived enough to know that hope is a choice, not an accident. She was wrong. On the night he was supposed to claim her before the pack, before the goddess, before their people, before the world, Alpha Odin Wilhelmsson looked past her. His amber eyes moved through the candlelit hall with the deliberateness of a man who had already made his decision. They drifted left, to the golden woman standing at the edge of the dais, to the white wolf who made lesser alphas weep. And he spoke her sister's name. Madeline was the woman with the wolf locked inside her chest. The woman who had loved him anyway, who had waited anyway, who had worn white silk and moonflowers in her dark hair and told herself it was nerves, the trembling in her hands, the cold sweat along her spine. She had told herself it was only nerves. She did not scream. She did not beg. She walked out of that great hall not broken but burning, and she kept walking. 3 days later, she knocked on the iron doors of Ravenspire. The most feared Alpha King on the continent opened them himself. She had arrived with nothing but a ruined heart and a wolf that refused to die. It would be enough. Quick pause, comment where you're watching from, and if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe. I've got a lot more coming. Chapter 1. The claiming that was not hers. The Great Hall of Nordvale has never looked more beautiful than the night it destroys her. Thousands of candles burn in iron chandeliers, each one placed by hand that morning by the pack's ceremonial women, who braided silver ribbon through the sconces and scattered dried moonflowers across the stone floor until the hall smelled of winter and something older, something sacred and waiting. The timber beams overhead are hung with the white pelts of the pack's ancestral wolves, each one a king or queen who had gone before, their spirits invited to witness the continuation of their line. Madeline has walked this hall 100 times. Tonight, it feels like the inside of a cathedral, or a cage. She stands at the top of the dais steps in ceremonial white, the silk cold against her skin where the warmth of the crowd has not yet reached. Her hair is down, all of it, the long black waves that fall past her waist, because Nordvale tradition demands the mate present herself unbound, unornamented, as close to her wolf self as a human body can render. The moonflowers threaded through her hair are her one concession to beauty, small silver white blooms that her mother used to press between the pages of old books. She has worn them tonight deliberately. A small rebellion. A private conversation between herself and a woman 3 years dead. Whatever happens, do not give them the satisfaction. Her mother's voice is the clearest thing in the room. Clearer than the drum beats that have just begun to pulse at the hall's far end, low and resonant. The claiming drum, the sound that has preceded every bonding ceremony in Nordvale for 400 years. Clearer than the murmur that moves through the assembled pack like wind through tall grass. Clearer than the sound of her own heartbeat, which she is working very hard not to count. She has been working very hard not to count a great many things tonight. The 3 years since the bond snapped into place, burning through her chest like a brand on a winter morning, sudden, absolute. Irreversible. The number of nights Odin failed to come to her in those years. The number of pack gatherings where she stood at the edge of things, watching him accept congratulations for claiming that hadn't happened yet, his eyes always finding someone else across the room. The number of times she had cataloged his silences and told herself it was the burden of leadership, the weight of the North, the slow-moving nature of a man who trusted nothing easily. The number of times she had believed her own translation. She does not look at Astrid. She has not looked at Astrid since she found her this morning, pale and bright-eyed in the dressing room they share, adjusting the silver combs in her golden hair with the particular care of a woman preparing for something important. Madeline had noticed. She had told herself it was ceremony nerves. She had told herself a great many things. The drums grow louder. The crowd parts. Odin Wilhelmsson walks the claiming path with the unhurried certainty of a man who has never once been told no, tall, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, jaw carved from the same granite as the northern mountains. He wears ceremonial black, no crown, the silver clasp of the alpha at his throat. He is everything the stories describe, magnetic and unreadable and devastating to look at directly, the way certain things in nature are, the way cliffs over water are, the kind of beautiful that contains its own warning. Madeline has loved him for 3 years. She has loved him the way rivers love the ocean, without asking permission, without requiring reciprocation, with a patience that has occasionally horrified her in its steadiness. She is not a patient woman by nature. She learned patience from a bond she didn't choose and an alpha who moved at the speed of glaciers and expected her to call it wisdom. He reaches the dais. His eyes find her, briefly, correctly, the way a man's eyes find the chair he is about to sit in. Acknowledgement. Nothing more. And then his gaze drifts. Left. It is the most devastating thing she has ever watched happen. Not because it is violent. Because it is gentle. The natural, unguarded movement of a man looking toward warmth. Toward Astrid, standing at the hall's left side in silver white, her golden hair loose, her white wolf mark glowing at her throat. Beautiful, terrible Astrid, whose expression is a complicated thing that Madeline cannot read from this distance, and will not let herself read at all. The priestess speaks. Her voice carries the old tongue, the words Madeline has known by heart since childhood, the sacred formula of claiming that names the bond and seals it, the words that should tonight, that should, by all cosmic law, by the moon goddess herself, name Madeline. The drums fall silent. Odin opens his mouth and speaks her sister's name. The silence that follows lasts perhaps 2 seconds. It feels like the end of something geological. Then the hall erupts, gasps, whispers, the particular sound of 400 people recalibrating their understanding of what they just witnessed, and Madeline stands very still in the center of it all and focuses on the cold weight of silk against her legs and the smell of moonflowers in her hair and her mother's voice. Do not give them the satisfaction. She does not cry. She does not scream. She walks. Down the dais steps one at a time, her back straight, her chin level, her expression the specific blankness that a woman achieves after enough years of practicing it. The crowd parts before her. She hears Astrid's voice behind her, her name, a broken sound, nothing she intends to answer. She hears the rustle of motion and knows before his hand closes on her arm that it is Odin, catching up in 3 long strides, the grip firm but not cruel, the grip of a man who believes he is owed an explanation from himself. She stops. She does not turn. A wolf that cannot shift cannot stand beside a king. His voice is low. Private. He has the decency, at least for that. The pack needs what Astrid has. What we don't. What I don't have, she says. Her voice is level. She is quite proud of her voice. A pause. He does not deny it. He says, instead, something worse, the careful sentence of a man who has rehearsed this, that Astrid's silver wolf is magnificent, that the pack requires strength at its right hand, that the bond between a fated mate without a visible wolf gift is not enough for a king who cannot afford appearances of weakness. He says the word gift as though she has simply forgotten to unwrap something. She removes his hand from her arm. She does it carefully, finger by finger, the way you dismantle something you do not want to damage further. She does not look at him. She does not look at Astrid, who has not moved from her place on the dais, who has the expression Madeline still cannot bring herself to read. She looks at the door. She walks through it. Behind her, deep in her chest, something shifts. Not the wolf she has always known was there, silent and locked away, but something older beneath it, something that has been waiting longer than she has been alive, curling in the dark of her with a patience that makes her own 3 years look like an afternoon. It does not feel like grief. It does not feel like loss. It feels like the moment before fire. Chapter 2. The Ride to Ravenspire. She takes the gray mare from the pack stables, her own horse, the one she has ridden since she was 14, whose name is Vesper and who does not require explanation or reassurance, who simply reads the urgency in Madeline's hands and moves. The northern road is empty at this hour, the moon enormous above the Ashwood's black treeline, the kind of full moon that makes the shadows of tree branches look like the veins of something vast and living. She does not look back at Nordvale's lights. She keeps her eyes on the road ahead, and she rides. For the first hour, she does not think. She permits herself that 1 hour of pure movement, the cold air against her face, the steady percussion of hooves, the smell of pine and frost, and the particular northern darkness that she has known all her life. She has spent her life in this darkness. She has loved a man who lived inside it. She knows its specific quality, the way it is never fully dark here, never fully still, the way the snow holds light even on moonless nights, and the wolves in the forest run bright-eyed and purposeful and free. She will not let herself envy them. Not tonight. After the first hour, the thinking begins. She does it systematically, the way she does most things, cataloging rather than feeling, sorting the evidence of the last 3 years with the detachment of a woman examining another woman's life. The first year, the bond settling into place, Odin's silences interpreted as the gravity of new authority, his absence from her chambers as the custom of a cautious man. The second year, the whispers beginning, the pack women's eyes, the particular way the court spoke to her as though she were already leaving. The third year, the growing certainty she refused to name, the nights she lay awake counting the things she had surrendered to a man who had never asked for them. Her patience, her visibility, her right to take up space without apology. She had given those things willingly, lovingly even. She had told herself that love required sacrifice, that a fated bond required tending, that she was the keeper of something sacred, and her endurance was its proof. She had believed, with the particular conviction of someone who has invested too much to reconsider, that patience and love were the same thing. They're not. The realization does not arrive like a revelation. It arrives like a door opening onto something that was always there, cold, clear, and slightly embarrassing in its obviousness. Patience is not love. Patience is endurance dressed in love's clothing. And she has been very, very patient for a very long time with a man who interpreted her stillness as acceptance and her acceptance as consent to be set aside. No more. By the second day, she has moved through grief and out the other side into something cleaner and more useful. The landscape changes as she rides north, the cultivated forests of Nordvale's territory giving way to wilder country, the road narrowing, the snowfall heavier, the trees older and stranger, their bark black with something that might be age or might be char. The stories she grew up with begin in this forest. The stories about what lives in the old growth between Nordvale and Ravenspire, wolves that do not obey pack law, old spirits, things that predate the current age of alphas and do not acknowledge its hierarchies. She rides through it without pausing. Whatever lives in these woods has not earned her fear tonight. On the third day, just before dawn, the road curves north around a long rise, and she sees it. Ravenspire. The castle rises from the forest the way a fist rises, sudden, absolute, undeniable. Black granite towers that catch no light and return none, high walls without decorative embellishment, no banners, no flags, nothing to announce or welcome. The forest presses close on all sides, the trees here older still, enormous and gnarled and threaded through with dark ivy. Even in the pre-dawn gray, the castle looks like something that has always existed, not built but emerged, as though the mountain itself decided to become architecture. At the gate, 2 guards in blackened steel step into her path. State your business. She looks at them. She is aware that she must look precisely what she is, a woman alone at the wrong end of 3 days on horseback, dark-eyed and cold and absolutely certain. She lets them look. Then, I am Madeline Arland of Nordvale. I'm here to offer your king a queen. They exchange a glance. One of them laughs, a short, disbelieving sound, and then the other, something in his eyes shifting, says, "Wait here." He disappears through the gate. His companion watches Madeline with the careful attention of a man reassessing something. 3 minutes later, the gate opens. She rides through. Ravenspire is nothing like Nordvale. Where Nordvale is ceremonial, designed to impress, to signal wealth and tradition, and the warmth of a functioning pack, Ravenspire is functional, Spartan, built for exactly one purpose. The inner yard is clean stone, no decoration, wolves moving through it with the quiet purpose of trained soldiers. The pack members she passes do not smile. They watch her with dark eyes and say nothing. The cold here is different from Nordvale's cold, older, deeper, as though the stone itself has been frozen long enough that the frost has become structural. She is brought to the Great Hall. It is enormous and almost entirely dark, the high windows admitting only the earliest gray of dawn, the torches on the far walls burning low. At the center, before a window that looks out over the Black Forest, stands a man, not seated on the throne behind him, standing, with his back half-turned, looking out at the trees. He is nothing like the stories. The stories describe a monster, the Demon King, the Wolf Lord, the man whose smile alone has ended wars. She expected something theatrical, something designed to intimidate. What she finds instead is a man who looks like he has forgotten there was a world outside the window, tall, powerfully built, scarred along one forearm where the sleeve is pushed back, dark hair cut close on the sides with longer waves at the top, utterly, entirely still. He turns when she enters, and she sees his face properly, a scar from temple to jaw on the left side, old and silver, the kind that speaks of surviving something extraordinary. Eyes the gray of deep water, taking her in without urgency. She crosses the room. She does not wait to be addressed. He watches her come. When she stops in front of him, close enough to speak without raising her voice, farther than courtesy requires, he looks at her for a long moment and says, "You're the one who can't shift." Yes. Something in his face does something she cannot name. Then, good. A pause, measured and deliberate. I've had enough of wolves who think shifting makes them invincible. Madeline looks at him, this scarred, still man who rules the most feared territory on the continent, who has outlasted more enemies than she has years, and thinks, for the first time in 3 days, that she may have made the right decision. Her wolf stirs in her chest like a coal catching air. Chapter 3. The Terms of a Loveless Marriage. The war room is the most honest room in Ravenspire. Madeline decides this within 3 minutes of entering it. The large stone chamber off the Great Hall's north side, lit by oil lamps and a fire that has clearly burned continuously for years, judging by the soot-dark ceiling above it. Maps cover 2 walls from floor to ceiling, some hand-drawn, some printed, all of them annotated in a cramped and efficient hand she will later learn is Cale's own. The long table at the room's center is scarred with years of use. Cups set down without care, blades rested without thought, the ordinary archaeology of a man who works. It smells like iron and pine resin and old fire. Cale sits at the table's head and does not pretend that they are here for anything other than what they are here for. He pours 2 cups of dark tea, slides one toward her without ceremony, and opens a leather document case. Nordvale's Southern Trade Routes, he says, without preamble. If you are my wife, I control the tariff rights. Odin Wilhelmsen loses 1/3 of his Eastern income. He's been encroaching on my border for 2 years. This stops it cleanly. She wraps her hands around the cup. The warmth is welcome. She says nothing. I need an heir. Political stability requires a successor, ideally within 2 years. The arrangement need not be anything other than functional. He meets her eyes across the table with the directness of someone who has dispensed with social cushioning as an unnecessary expense. I am not asking you to love me. I am asking you to be useful, and in exchange I will provide safety, resources, and a position that reflects your actual capability rather than your pack's opinion of your wolf. She considers this. She turns a cup in her hands. And what, she says, is your actual opinion of my wolf? A beat. Something in his eyes moves. I don't have one yet. I find it more productive to form opinions based on evidence than on rumor. She sets the cup down. She folds her hands on the table. I want access to your war council. A seat at the table, not as decoration, not as a political show. I want to be consulted. He nods once. She continues. My own guard. Women, if possible. I don't need loyalty tested by anyone who arrived here before I did. And I want to investigate the deaths of your previous intended brides. The room goes still in a specific way, the way rooms go still when something true has been said aloud. Cale's expression does not change. This is one of the most unsettling things about him. She is already noticing the way his face processes information without distributing it. A man with an extremely expensive inner life and very controlled real estate on his face. Leave the investigation alone, he says. His voice is even, not threatening. Something more considered than that. Were they accidents? The silence that follows is perhaps 4 seconds long. It is the most informative 4 seconds of her life thus far. No, he says. But the man who killed them is still inside this castle. If you start asking questions before you're established here, before you have allies, before the court knows what to make of you, you'll be the fourth. She holds his gaze. He does not look away. Sign the contract. Let me build a wall around you. Then investigate whatever you like. I will not stop you. Why not? If the man is your ally. He is not my ally. He is a fixture I cannot remove without evidence. Something moves briefly through his expression, frustration, quickly contained. I have been trying to find that evidence for 2 years. The women who died were, he stops. He looks down at the papers between them. When he looks up, the expression is gone. Sign the contract. She picks up the pen. She signs. But she begins watching immediately, cataloging the faces of the people who enter the war room to deliver messages, the ones whose eyes linger on her with calculation rather than curiosity, the advisors who smile with their mouths and assess with their eyes. Ravenspire has its own politics, its own undercurrent, its own map of loyalties and resentments that has nothing to do with the official one hanging on the wall. She has always been very good at maps. Cale watches her watching. When the last advisor leaves and they are alone again, he says, "You're already doing it." Doing what? Reading the room. Sorting people. He leans back in his chair. There is something in his voice that might, in another man, be admiration. Most people who arrive here spend the first month simply surviving the cold. She looks at him across the scarred table. This man she is about to marry, this stranger with the scar and the careful eyes and the war room that smells like iron. I've been surviving cold for 3 years, she says. I'm quite efficient at it now. He doesn't smile, but something at the corner of his mouth acknowledges her. She decides that will do. For now. Chapter 4. The Wedding Under a Blood Moon. The chapel is older than the castle. This is evident from the stone itself, a different color than Ravenspire's walls, darker, almost purple in the torchlight, quarried from somewhere that no longer exists or is no longer spoken about. The ceiling is low and barrel-vaulted, the windows narrow slits through which the night comes in as cold and absolute as intention. No candles. Torches mounted on iron brackets, their light moving with the draft that finds its way through the old stone and does not apologize for it. Madeline stands at the chapel's entrance and feels, unexpectedly, that she has been here before. Not in body. In some older part of herself that does not use the same language as her mind. The wolf self that has been locked away since before she could form memories. The self that exists in the part of her chest that has always burned with a heat that had nothing to do with Odin Wilhelmsson, nothing to do with a bond she was handed and told was destiny. The part that knows things without knowing how. It says, "Pay attention." She enters. The court of Ravenspire lines both sides of the chapel, 60, perhaps 70 people, their faces in torchlight a study in wariness. These are not the polished, ceremony-trained attendants of Nordvale. They are soldiers, hunters, advisors, the pack's functional elite, people who have seen things and survived them, who assess newcomers with the particular economy of those who cannot afford to be wrong. They look at Madeline and she reads them. Suspicion, curiosity, and beneath both, the specific calculation of people who want to know what she is before they decide how to treat her. She meets their eyes as she walks. She does not drop her gaze. Cale waits at the altar. Not the altar's center, where grooms of ceremony stand, but slightly to the left of it, as though he has been looking at the window. He turns when she enters, and she watches him watch her approach, the careful stillness of his face doing something she cannot entirely parse. The torchlight catches the silver in his scar. He is wearing black, all of it, collar up, no ornamentation, nothing to signal occasion except his bearing, which is its own announcement. Outside, wolves circle the chapel perimeter. She can hear them. The soft pad of many paws, the occasional low vocalization, the wolves of Ravenspire present for this marriage the way the pack's wolves are always present for what matters, instinctive as weather, old as the ceremony itself. The priestess speaks the old tongue. These are different words from Nordvale's claiming rights. Older. She thinks more muscular, stripped of the ceremonial flourishes that Nordvale's tradition has accumulated over centuries of wanting to appear important. Ravenspire's vows are direct. They are about protection and honesty, and the sharing of a territory that includes both its land and its danger. Nothing about love. Nothing about fated bonds. Nothing about the moon goddess's plans, which Madeline is, at the moment, not inclined to attribute good intentions to. She repeats what is asked of her. Her voice is steady. Then the blood bond. The priestess produces a small ceremonial blade, runs it across Madeline's palm, then Cale's, a shallow cut. Nothing dramatic, the kind of sting that registers and then fades. They press their palms together. And then something happens that is not in the ceremony. A pulse of heat, not metaphorical, not the warmth of proximity, but actual heat, the heat of something igniting, moving from her palm into his like a current finding a channel. Madeline feels it travel up her arm and into her chest, and Cale, steady, controlled, unreadable Cale, goes very still in a way that is different from his ordinary stillness. His gray eyes drop to their joined hands, then come back up to her face. What was that? His voice is quiet. For the court, this might read as ceremony. For her, standing 18 inches away, it reads as a man genuinely asking a question. I don't know. He holds her gaze for a long moment. The torchlight moves between them. Yes, you do, he says. She doesn't answer. Because she doesn't know, not consciously, not in the language of knowledge she can articulate, but in the part of her that existed before language. The part that has been locked away and is no longer entirely still. Something has recognized something. Something has said, this. The way a compass needle says, north. The court exhales as one. The priestess concludes the vows. And then Cale does the thing that shocks the room silent. Mid-turn, as they prepare to face the assembled court as married persons, he reaches up and tucks a strand of her hair back from her face. One strand, loosened by the chapel's draft, caught against her cheek. An unscripted gesture, small and unhurried, domestic in a way that is entirely out of keeping with everything about this room and this man and this arrangement. The court stares. Madeline stares, briefly, at the wall ahead. Then she faces the assembled wolves of Ravenspire, her husband's arm at her side, and she holds her chin level and does not look like a woman who has just felt something move in her chest that she does not have words for yet. Outside, the wolves are howling. She has heard wolves howl her entire life, in grief, in warning, in the ceremonial call that marks the turns of the moon. She has never heard them howl like this. Joyful, she thinks. Or perhaps the word is simply certain. Her wolf, locked away, silent, sealed by something older than herself, presses, briefly, against the inside of her ribs, like a hand pressing against glass. Not yet, but soon. Chapter 5. The cold between them and the cracks in it. The first weeks of Madeline's marriage to Cale Draven are characterized by a careful, mutual distance that functions almost as choreography. They move through Ravenspire on parallel tracks, him to the war room, the training grounds, the border meetings that arrive with their own particular urgencies, her through the castle's living architecture, the kitchens and the infirmary, and the pack halls where the working members of Ravenspire eat and argue and make the decisions that keep a territory of 4,000 running. She does not wait to be given access. She finds it. The head cook is a woman named Bird who has strong opinions about root vegetables and no patience for anyone she suspects of condescension. Madeline sits in her kitchen for 2 hours on the third morning, asking questions and eating what she is given, and leaves with a kitchen ally and an extremely accurate picture of Ravenspire's daily politics, who owes whom favors, which advisors eat separately and why, which guards have been on duty so long their loyalty has calcified into something that might not survive pressure. The pack healer is a quiet man named Rose who practices out of a room in the castle's east wing, surrounded by dried herbs and the particular solemnity of someone who has spent his life in the presence of pain. He tells her over several visits about the injuries that come through his door, what they reveal about which members of the pack are being pushed too hard, which conflicts are simmering below the official story. He does not tell her any of this deliberately. She simply asks the right questions and listens with genuine interest, and people, in Madeline's experience, will tell you almost anything if they believe you actually want to know. Within 2 weeks, she has mapped Ravenspire the way she used to map Nordvale, not its geography, which anyone can learn from a diagram, but its human architecture. Its loyalties and resentments, its debts and its ambitions, the precise location of its fracture lines. Cale's advisors are able, mostly loyal, and deeply uncertain about her. Lord Valdric, the eldest of them, silver-haired and courteous and with eyes like two chips of pale ice, is the one she returns to most often in her thinking. He is the one who speaks to her with the greatest care. Care that looks like courtesy and functions like a wall. She files him away. She is not ready to move yet. Cale notices what she is doing. He notices it the way he seems to notice most things. Quietly, without announcing the noticing, in the specific way of someone who is very good at watching and very habituated to not acting on what they see. He begins to leave the war room door open when she passes. A small adjustment. Deniable as invitation. She walks past it 3 times before she walks through it. Their conversations in those early weeks are layered things, politically relevant on the surface, with currents of something else beneath, conversations that know they are circling something and have agreed, by unspoken mutual consent, to keep circling it without yet naming it. He asks her about Nordvale's court with a focused interest of a man gathering intelligence, and she answers honestly, because she is no longer loyal to Nordvale's interests and because honesty, she has decided, is the most strategic thing she can offer a man who has been managed and deceived for years. He seems to understand this. He answers her questions about Ravenspire with a similar directness that surprises her. He does not perform the evasion she expected, does not couch things in the political vagueness she has always associated with men in power. He just says what is true. It is, she realizes, deeply unusual. The armory is where it changes. She is up late. She sleeps poorly in Ravenspire's cold, in a bed that is extremely large and entirely hers, in chambers that are comfortable and unoccupied and silent in a way that has its own specific quality. She is moving through the castle at the hour when the night watch has settled and the castle breathes at its slowest, and she turns down the passage toward the training courtyard and sees firelight under the armory door. She opens it without thinking, an old habit, the instinct of a woman who has spent years opening doors toward light. Cale is alone, seated on a bench beside the fire, a whetstone in one hand and his personal sword in the other, working the edge with the steady, rhythmic attention of a man who finds this meditative. He looks up when she enters. He does not ask why she is there. He shifts slightly on the bench, not moving away, but making room, and returns his attention to the blade. She sits. They talk until dawn. She cannot, afterward, account for how this happens. The conversation begins as information exchange, observations about the pack, practical matters, and then dissolves, by increments she cannot track, into something else entirely. He tells her about the forest to Ravenspire's north, the territories that have no pack law, and the things that live there. And she tells him about the Ashwood near Nordvale, the old paths through it that no maps record, and that she learned as a child from a groundskeeper who believed children should know every exit. He asks why she needed to know every exit. She says she was a child who anticipated needing them. He looks at her with something that might be recognition, and says nothing. They talk about nothing that is urgent, everything that is real. When the first gray comes through the high window, they both notice it and both do the thing reasonable people do, which is begin to disengage. The natural conclusion of a conversation that has lasted longer than intended, the careful untangling of an evening that will require reassessment in the morning. He walks her back to her chambers. At the door, in the gray light of a beginning morning, he pauses. "You're not what I expected." She turns, leans one shoulder against the door frame. "What did you expect?" A long pause. Not the pause of someone searching for words. The pause of someone deciding whether to say the true ones. Someone easier to ignore. She looks at him. This man with the careful face and the scar and the armory fire still in his eyes, and she says, "I'll add it to the list of things I've failed at," and opens her door and goes inside. She stands in the middle of her dark room for a moment, her back to the closed door, and notices that her chest feels different. Not lighter, exactly. Warmer, like something in the region of her locked-away wolf has moved, not toward freedom, not yet, but toward the wall that contains it. A single step, a reorientation. She does not permit herself to examine what it means. She goes to bed and sleeps better than she has in weeks. Chapter 6. Odin comes. The messenger arrives on a Tuesday morning with a Nordvale seal and a message so short it constitutes a threat. Alpha Odin Wilhelmsson requests audience at Ravenspire's gates. 40 soldiers. Immediate. Madeline is in the war room when Cale reads it. She watches his face do nothing and his eyes do everything. The rapid interior calculation of a man assessing a threat in real time, the particular stillness of someone who has learned to think loudest when he is most outwardly silent. Then he hands her the message. She reads it. She folds it. She hands it back. "Open the gates," she says. "Let him come inside." Cale looks at her. "You want him in here. I want him to see what's in here. There's a difference." Another beat of that interior calculation. Then he sends the order. The Great Hall is the right setting for this. High ceiling, long sightlines. The throne at the far end elevated on its black stone dais in a way that forces supplicants to walk toward it for a considerable distance. Cale takes his throne. Madeline stands beside it, not seated, not at a remove, but standing at his right hand with the deliberateness of a woman who has thought carefully about where she chooses to place herself and why. The doors open. Odin Wilhelmsson walks the length of the Great Hall and he looks, she thinks, like a man who has not slept in 6 weeks. She does not permit herself sympathy. She knows what the fated bond does to the rejecter. The way it turns on them when the bond is severed. The way the body knows it has done a violence to itself and begins to register it. She has lived on the receiving end of a bond for 3 years. She knows exactly what it costs. The accounting is simply arriving at a different door now, and the part of her that might once have felt pity has been replaced by something more equitable. He stops in front of the throne. His eyes find her immediately. Not Cale, her, with the particular arrested quality of a man who has been looking for something and found it in the wrong place. His expression is complicated. Guilt, longing, anger, and beneath them all, the raw, unguarded desperation of someone in physical pain. The bond withdrawal is not theatrical. It is physiological. She can see it in the tension around his jaw, the particular set of his shoulders. She holds his gaze without expression. "I've come to discuss the situation," he says. He is talking to the room, or trying to, but his eyes are on her. "The situation," Cale says from the throne, his voice carrying without effort, "is that Madeline is my wife and queen of this territory. What specifically required 40 soldiers to discuss." A muscle in Odin's jaw works. He looks, finally, directly at Cale. The fated bond is not dissolved by a marriage certificate. It is not a legal matter. It is ours to grieve, Madeline says. The room shifts. She has not raised her voice. She does not need to. The acoustics of the Great Hall and 3 years of learning to be heard in rooms where she was meant to be invisible have given her this at least. The ability to make herself the only sound in a room. Odin turns to her fully. His face does the complicated thing again. "Madeline, you called my wolf a defect." She does not move from her position. "You stood in front of 400 people and told the priestess and the goddess and your entire pack that I was not enough. You chose Astrid because she was magnificent, and I was inconvenient." A pause. "I owe you nothing. Not my presence. Not my return. Not even this conversation. The bond is yours to grieve," she says again. "Not mine. I grieved it while I was still standing in the hall. You don't get to arrive here and require my participation in yours." Odin looks at her for a long moment. Something moves through his face. Anger cycling rapidly towards something rawer, something that might, in a different context, earn her compassion. Then he turns to Cale, and his voice goes cold with the kind of contempt that belongs to a man who is losing and knows it. "She can't shift. She'll never run beside you. She's half a wolf, and you know it." Cale stands. The room temperature drops, not metaphorically or not only metaphorically. The wolves of Ravenspire, who line the hall's walls, straighten. The air in the great room becomes something attentive, something waiting. "She is my queen." His voice is even. It is far more frightening for being even. "And the next man who calls her broken will leave this hall in pieces. Escort our guests out." The guards move. Odin holds his ground for 2 seconds. Exactly 2. She counts them. And then the calculation of a man who is outnumbered in enemy territory reasserts itself, and he goes. His 40 soldiers go with him. In the doorway, one figure pauses. Astrid. She has stayed behind Odin's delegation, and Madeline has been aware of her presence throughout in the specific, background way of someone who has spent a lifetime being hyper-aware of their sister's location in any room. Now, Astrid stands at the door of Ravenspire's great hall with her golden hair and her white wolf grace, and the expression of a woman who has been composing something for weeks and is not sure it is enough. Their eyes meet. Astrid says one word. Sorry. Madeline says nothing. Some apologies arrive too late to be medicine. They can still be acknowledged, the effort of them, the cost of them, and set down carefully, like something breakable, for another time. She does not have the language for forgiveness yet. But she realizes, not angry at Astrid the way she expected to be. Astrid is a woman who loved a man who asked her to be chosen. That is a different crime than Odin's. She will sort this out later. Not today. The doors of Ravenspire close. In the great hall, the silence settles. She becomes aware that Chaol is watching her from the throne with the specific quality of attention he reserves for things he finds worth examining. She turns to face him fully. "Thank you," she says. He looks at her for a moment. "You didn't need it." "No," she agrees. "But it was well done anyway." Something at the corner of his mouth does the thing that is not quite a smile. She realizes, beginning to recognize it. Beginning to look for it. She will sort that out later too. Chapter 7. The women who died before her. She finds the old wing by accident, the way most important discoveries are made. Following a passage she has not taken before, looking for the castle's original east tower, which Bert the cook mentioned offhandedly as the source of the best winter light in Ravenspire, she passes through an archway where the stonework is different, older again, even than the chapel, the mortar a different color, and the proportions slightly wrong by current building standards, made for a slightly smaller people or a slightly different understanding of space. The passage smells of cold, and something else, something faintly floral in the way of dried things. Lavender, perhaps. The kind women use for keeping. 3 doors. 2 locked, 1 not. She opens the unlocked one. It is a room that has been cleared. Furniture removed, floor swept. Nothing remaining that might indicate who lived here or for how long. But clearing a room is not the same as erasing it. There is a dark stain on the hearthstone that the sweep did not reach. There is a hook on the wall, without its hanging. There is the faint rectangular impression in the dust of the windowsill where something was kept for years and recently removed. A book, she thinks, from the size of it. She stands in the empty room for a long time. "You found it." The voice comes from the doorway. She turns. The woman standing there is perhaps 70, small and erect, dressed in Ravenspire's pack gray, with the additional pinned cloth at the shoulder that marks long service. Her face is the specific kind of old that comes from having survived things. Not soft, but not hard either. Tempered. The way certain materials are stronger for having been through fire. "Hilda," the woman says, as though this is the beginning of a longer sentence. Then nothing else. "Madeline," Madeline says. "I know who you are. I've been waiting for someone to come down here for 2 years. She steps into the room and looks around at the emptiness with the expression of someone examining a wound. This was Serafini's room. She was the third intended bride. Madeline sits on the edge of the empty hearth because her knees have decided this is a sitting-down conversation and watches Hilda. "Tell me," she says. Hilda tells her. The first woman, Lisa, a trade alliance daughter from the Southern Territories, died in the Ashwood on what was recorded as a hunting accident. Hilda does not believe it was an accident. Lisa had been asking questions about Ravenspire's succession laws, specifically about what a queen's rights were if she came to the marriage having learned things she wasn't meant to know. She was killed 3 weeks before the wedding. The second, Petra, a niece of one of the border chiefs, found something in the castle archives. A journal, Hilda says. Not recent. Old. Kept by a woman who died before Chaol was born, who wrote about a bloodline that Ravenspire's lineage records had been altered to conceal. Petra had gone to Chaol with what she found. She was dead within a fortnight. Chaol believes she fell from the Eastern Tower. He believes this because there is no evidence that he can use to believe otherwise. The third, Serafini. She was a Nightfire wolf, Hilda says. Her voice changes on the word, quieter, waited. The rarest bloodline in all the northern packs. A wolf of dark flame. They haven't existed for 60 years. Not since the last of the old bloodline was hunted out. A pause. She looks at Madeline with the specific quality of someone delivering news they have been carrying too long. She looked like you. Dark hair. Brown eyes. Couldn't shift. Madeline is very still. She couldn't shift, Madeline says, because the Nightfire wolf doesn't emerge gradually, Hilda says. It doesn't show in the way common wolf gifts do, incrementally from childhood. It wakes all at once, when the bloodline ripens. It can take until the mid-20s. Until then, the wolf is invisible. A breath. Or it can be sealed, hidden deliberately by someone who knows how, before the child is old enough to know what she is. The room is very quiet. My mother, Madeline says. Not a question. Your mother. Hilda nods. She died when you were 2. Before she died, and I know this because I knew her, she was a Ravenspire woman before she went south. She sealed your wolf the only way a Nightfire mother can seal her pup Shift, with her own life force. It was her last act. The cold of the hearthstone through her clothes is a specific and grounding sensation.
She focuses on it.
She knew they'd come for me. She knew what you were. She knew someone in the north was hunting the bloodline. She sent you south to Nordvale with a name that meant nothing and a wolf that couldn't be read. Hilda's voice is steady, but her hands are not. You were supposed to be invisible. You were supposed to be ordinary. And then the bond happened, and Odin Wilhelmsson put you at the center of everything. And the man who hunts Nightfire wolves saw me. They look at each other. Lord Valdrick, Madeline says. Hilda does not answer. She doesn't need to. Madeline sits in the empty room where a woman with her eyes and her wolf and her impossible gift died 2 years ago, and she thinks about Odin telling her she was half a wolf. She thinks about 3 years of believing him. She thinks about the locked-away thing in her chest that has been pressing against its seal with increasing insistence, not absence. Presence, not broken.
Bound.
She thinks, I was never deficient. I was hidden. I was hidden because I was worth hiding. Her wolf, in the dark of her chest, opens her eyes for the first time. Chapter 8. The closer they come. The servant with the blade outside her door is found on a Wednesday morning, standing with his back against the wall with the specific vacancy of a man whose will has been temporarily borrowed by someone else. The blade is curved, the kind that does not make a sound on the draw. He does not remember, when he is questioned, anything after accepting a cup of wine from an advisor at the evening meal. He does not have the eyes of a man who intended to be here. Compulsion, the pack healer confirms. A rare skill among alpha wolves, illegal in every territory, last recorded formally in the border wars 30 years ago. It requires proximity and a specific kind of strength, the kind that comes from a long practice of imposing your will on others in smaller ways until the larger imposition becomes possible. Kale comes to her room that night. She is awake. She has been awake, sitting in the chair by the fire with a book she has not turned the pages of, her body still in the way that adrenaline's aftermath demands, the particular locked stillness of a person who is almost a different kind of story. He knocks once and opens the door without waiting for her answer, which she registers as both presumptuous and, in the particular context of this evening, exactly appropriate. He looks at her. He looks at the chair. He looks at the book, still open to the same page it was 2 hours ago. He crosses the room and takes the book and sets it aside. Pack your things from the secondary wardrobe, he says. You're moving to the adjoining chambers. The ones that share a passage with yours. Yes. She considers arguing. She does not argue. She is fundamentally a practical woman, and the argument she might make about independence, about the appearance of proximity, about not wanting to give the court more to discuss, weighs very little against the evidence of the evening and the knowledge now in her possession about what Valdrick is and what he's willing to do. She moves. The adjoining chambers are warmer. The shared wall with his rooms conducts heat better than the outer stone walls. Her sleep improves. She is aware of the particular irony of this. She does not mention it. The closeness changes the quality of things between them, not dramatically, not in the way of declared feelings or crossed distances. More the way proximity changes music, the same notes, but heard differently, the overtones altered. They have breakfast across the connecting table some mornings. He reads while she writes letters. She has begun corresponding with the pack councils of 3 surrounding territories, building the network she knows a queen requires, assembling the alliances that Ravenspire's isolation has allowed to atrophy. He reads her letters occasionally, with her permission, and offers observations that are consistently useful and occasionally brilliant. She tells him about what Hilda told her. She does it on a morning when the light is good, and she has decided she is done waiting for the right moment, because the right moment is a trap, and she has lived in it long enough. She tells him about the Nightfire Wolf, about her mother, about the seal, about Serafini. He listens without interrupting. When she finishes, he is quiet for a time, not the absence of response, but the particular quality of a man integrating new information into a structure that was already complicated. I chose you, he says finally, because I needed an ally I could trust. A woman who had survived public rejection would be harder to emotionally destroy. I thought you would be steady, practical, useful. She waits. I didn't anticipate, he stops. He looks at her across the table with the expression of a man navigating territory without a map. I didn't anticipate you, he says simply. What you are, what you notice, the way he stops again. The expression does something complicated. I chose you thinking you were safe. I was wrong. Wrong that I was safe? Wrong to think safety was what I needed. The room holds the sentence between them. She does not look away. He does not look away. Outside, in the corridor, footsteps pass without stopping, someone going about the castle's morning business, unaware that in this room 2 people who arrived at a strategic marriage are currently standing at the edge of something that was not in the contract. He moves. Not quickly, not with the urgency of someone who has decided, but with the considered deliberateness of someone who has decided and is choosing to be honest about the choice. He crosses the small distance between the chairs and he puts his hand under her chin and he kisses her.
Brief. Searching.
The kind of kiss that is really a question. Neither of them speaks afterward. The fire burns. Outside the window, wolves call across the forest, low and ongoing, the sound of a pack in communication, the ancient language of their kind. In her chest, her wolf presses against the seal with a force she has never felt before. Not desperate, purposeful. The difference between clawing at a door and simply opening it. The seal holds, but it is no longer as sure of itself as it was. Chapter 9. The seal breaks. The wolf rises. Valdric moves on a moondark Thursday, which Madeline will later understand was deliberate. The old lore around Nightfire wolves holds that they are weakest when the moon is absent from the sky, when the light that activates the bloodline is at its most withdrawn. He has been planning this since Madeline arrived. Probably since before. He calls a formal assembly of the court. She knows something is wrong when she enters the throne room and feels the air. Courts have their own specific pressure systems. She has been reading them since she was a child standing at the edges of Nordvale's great gatherings, learning to distinguish between the weight of routine ceremony and the weight of an agenda. This air is heavy and deliberate and tilted, the air of a room that has been prepared in advance for a particular outcome. She takes her place beside Cale's throne. She looks at Valdric. He looks back at her with the careful courtesy he has maintained since her arrival, and she understands, with the clarity that fear sometimes provides, that the courtesy was always armor. He was protecting himself from the moment he looked at her and recognized what Serafini was, before Serafini knew it herself. What Madeline is. What she would eventually become. He begins to speak. His case is presented with the skill of a man who has had 30 years of practice constructing narratives in throne rooms. The suspicious timing of Madeline's arrival, the fated bond with the Alpha of Nordvale that cannot legally dissolve without the consent of both parties, her unknown bloodline, the strategic value of Nordvale in placing a spy close to Ravenspire's king. His voice is measured and credible and building toward a conclusion he has already written. The court listens. She watches them listening. Cale's face does nothing. He sits in the throne of his ancestors with the stillness of a man who has been through every version of betrayal and has arrived at a place past surprise. He watches Valdric. He does not look at her. She understands, from the quality of his not looking, that he is thinking very fast. Valdric reaches his conclusion. Madeline Arlen should be removed from Ravenspire before she can complete whatever mission brought her here. He uses the word expulsion. He says execution as an alternative, very carefully, as though it is a reluctant consideration. The room breathes. Then Madeline says, "May I speak?" A parliamentary question, technically. Cale's gaze moves to her. He gives the minimal nod that opens the floor. She turns to face the court. All of them, the full assembly, the wolves and advisors and pack leaders of Ravenspire who have watched her for 3 months with varying degrees of wariness and have not yet made up their minds. She looks at them the way she learned to look at rooms she was not meant to occupy, steadily, without apology, as though her presence is so established it requires no defense. Lord Valdric is correct that I have an unusual bloodline, she says. He is correct that it represents a threat to the existing power structure of this court. A beat. He is incorrect about which part of the power structure it threatens. She pauses. She turns to Valdric. Lisa died 3 weeks before her wedding because she was asking questions about succession law. Petra died a fortnight after she found a journal in the archives, a journal that described the Nightfire bloodline and its suppression from the official lineage records. Her voice is steady. She has practiced this steadiness her whole life. Serafini was a Nightfire wolf. She died 2 years ago in this castle in a fire that no one could explain, and everyone agreed not to investigate. The room is so quiet she can hear the torches. Every woman who got close to the truth was removed. Not because they were threats to Ravenspire, because they were threats to the man who has spent 30 years profiting from a king who trusts him. Valdric moves. He is fast, faster than a man his age should be, the speed of someone who has maintained his wolf gifts through decades of careful practice, and the blade he draws is nothing ceremonial. He crosses the distance between them with the directness of someone who has decided that the performance is over. Kale is faster. He catches Valdric's arm at the wrist, and the crack of impact is enormous in the stone room. They go to the floor together. The old advisor and the king, 30 years of false loyalty resolved into 10 seconds of honest combat. The court erupts. Guards move. Wolves shift in the shadows. And Madeline stands at the center of the throne room with the sound of her heartbeat very loud in her ears and the sight of the man she married fighting the man who has been killing women in this castle, and something inside her chest that has been locked away for 24 years decides, with the finality of a door opening that has never been opened before, that it is done waiting. It begins in her spine, a heat that is not temperature, a pressure that moves upward from the base of her and outward through her bones and into her skin, and it is not painful, but it is total, the way light is total when it fills a room, when there is no corner of it left in shadow. Her vision goes white-edged. Her hands at her sides are trembling, and then they are not. They are very still, very certain, the stillness of something that has arrived. The seal breaks. She does not scream. She simply becomes. The wolf that rises from Madeline Arland is not silver like Astrid's. She is not white. She is the precise color of the night sky at its deepest point, a darkness so complete it has texture, and she is ringed in silver flame that moves without heat along the edges of her form, the ancient mark of the Nightfire bloodline, the thing that Valdric has been hunting for 30 years, the thing her mother gave her life to hide. She is enormous. She is magnificent. She is devastatingly, absolutely, finally real. The throne room of Ravenspire goes silent. Guards stand with weapons half-drawn and do not complete the draw. Advisors who have served in this court for decades take a step backward in unified and instinctive reverence. Valdric, on the floor beneath Kale's grip, makes a sound that is not quite a word. The Nightfire wolf looks at Kale Draven. She looks at him with gray wolf eyes that carry in them the particular intelligence of a woman who has been watching him for 3 months and has decided. And she kneels. The entire court kneels with her. Chapter 10. Queen of Ravenspire. A kingdom transformed. 6 months later, Ravenspire looks like itself again. Or perhaps, more accurately, it looks like what it always was supposed to be before 30 years of careful diminishment did their work. Warm where it was not warm before, its halls occupied by the specific busyness of a functioning court that trusts itself, its king visible in it rather than barricaded behind it. The wolves are different too. She notices this most in the mornings, the way the pack moves now, with the ease of animals in their proper territory, without the low-grade tension that she had initially attributed to Ravenspire's nature and now understands was Valdric's legacy. 3 decades of a man who needed the pack uncertain, needed the king isolated, needed the castle to function at a fraction of its actual capacity so that the power he had built in the negative space of its weakness could persist. Valdric is imprisoned in Ravenspire's lower cells, awaiting the formal trial that 3 border territories have agreed to send representatives for. The evidence, the journal Petra found, reconstructed, Hilda's testimony, the healer's records, the compulsion evidence from the servant who was used against Madeline, is overwhelming. The outcome is not in question. The trial is a matter of record, not deliberation. The truth of the three brides has been made public within Ravenspire and to the surrounding territories. Chaol released the information himself, without softening it, without the political crafting that would have served him better in the short term. He did this because Madeline asked him to, and his reason for agreeing was simple. They deserve to be named. Lisa, Petra, Serafini, women who came here looking for futures and were killed for knowing too much, their deaths filed as accidents, their lives erased from the official record. They are in the record now. Madeline visits the old wing every week. She has had Serafini's room restored. The fated bond between her and Odin, the thing she spent 3 years tending, the thing she walked out of Nordvale's great hall still carrying in her chest even as she burned, dissolved 6 weeks after her wolf emerged. Not violently. The way winter ends, gradually, then completely, the particular morning when you notice the cold has left and cannot say exactly when it went. She felt it go with a clarity that she expected to hurt and discovered, with some surprise, did not. It felt like setting down something she had been carrying so long she had stopped noticing the weight. A letter arrives on a gray Thursday morning. The seal is Nordvale's. She recognizes Odin's hand on the outer fold before she breaks it. The deliberate, slightly cramped script of a man who is taught to write by someone impatient. The letter is formal, a request for peace negotiation, a proposed meeting of border councils, the acknowledgement of Ravenspire's territorial rights that Odin has been encroaching on for 2 years. It is a good letter, carefully considered. It will be answered carefully. Behind it, a second letter. Astrid's hand. She reads this one alone, in the window seat of her chambers, while the morning comes gray and quiet over Ravenspire's forest. Astrid's letter is not formal. It is long and specific and honest in the way that only people who have stopped performing can manage. An account of the 3 years she spent watching Madeline love a man who did not deserve it, the night of the claiming and what Astrid tried to do to stop it, the silence she was bought with a threat she believed. The guilt of someone who did not do enough, not from cruelty, but from a failure of courage that she has had 6 months to live with. I know I don't get to ask for forgiveness, Astrid writes near the end. I know that. I'm just asking you to know that I'm asking anyway. Madeline folds the letter. She does not put it away. She puts it on the windowsill where the light can reach it. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Forgiveness is a thing you do for yourself, a setting down, a refusal to carry someone else's wrongdoing as though it belongs to you. She is working toward it, not for Astrid's sake, not yet, but for her own, because she has spent enough of her life as someone else's unfinished business, and she is done with it. She is done with other people's weights. She goes to find Chaol. He is on the battlement, the western one, her favorite, the one that looks out over the forest toward the distant mountains where the sky turns pink at dusk. He is standing at the edge with his forearms on the stone, looking north, and she knows from the quality of his stillness that he has been here for some time. She has learned to read his silences now, the dozens of varieties of them, their specific weights and meanings. This one is the silence of a man thinking about something he does not know how to ask. She stands beside him. She puts her hands on the stone wall. Below them, Ravenspire's wolves move through the edge of the forest, running, not hunting, the purposeless joy of it, the kind of motion that exists just to exist. The letter from Nordvale came, she says. I saw. A moment. Do you regret it? His voice is careful. It is the voice he uses for questions he does not want to appear to care about. Coming here? She considers this, considers it honestly, which is the only way she considers things anymore. The cold of the stone wall under her palms. The smell of the forest. The sound of wolves running below. The weight of the letter in her room, and the weight that isn't in her chest anymore, where the fated bond used to live. No, she says. Even after everything? She looks at him, this man with the careful face and the silver scar, and the war room full of maps and the armory fire in his eyes on the night he told her she was not what he expected. This man who stood in a throne room and called her his queen before she was, who released his advisor's confessions to the public record because the women who died deserved to be named, who has been learning. She has watched it happen, the slow thaw of someone who stopped trusting the world a long time ago and is, cautiously, beginning again. I was told for years that I was half a wolf, she says, that I was missing the most important part of what I was. She looks back at the forest. I came here to survive a broken heart. I found out I was never broken. That seems like a fair trade. He is quiet for a moment. Then he turns from the forest and faces her, and his expression is the one she has been learning to recognize, the one where the careful architecture of his face lets something through that he has decided to permit. He puts his hand over hers on the cold stone wall, and he kisses her, there on the battlement, in the gray evening air above the running wolves and the dark forest, and the kingdom that was never supposed to be hers. Below them, the wolves of Ravenspire raise their voices, not in warning, not in grief, in the ancient language of their kind, the sound that means, finally, the sound that means, this is the one, the sound that means, we have been waiting for exactly this, and it has arrived. Inside the castle, a fire burns in the great hall. The pack eats together, all of them, the advisors and the guards and the healers and the kitchen staff, the old division between those who serve and those who govern dissolved, for this evening, into something warmer and less careful. The king's laugh carries through the hall, and the court notes it with a surprised recognition of people hearing something they had given up expecting. The queen is at his right hand. She is eating Bert's lamb. She is listening to an argument about the eastern trade routes with the particular focused attention of a woman who will have opinions on this tomorrow and is gathering material tonight. She looks like someone who belongs here. She looks like someone who has always belonged here, who simply required the long road to find it. And Madeline Arland, who was told she was nothing, who was told she was half a wolf, who was told she was missing the most important part of what she was, sits on the throne that was never meant for her and realizes, the goddess did not get it wrong. She just got it early. And some fates require the long road home.
If you enjoy watching this story, please like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.